Last night we discovered that there's something worse than a State of the Union address that is filled with lies. And that is a State of the Union address that is filled with lies that goes on forever. In this case, for about 2 hours, the longest in history. It was filled with the usual Trump weird bragging about himself and making claims that are totally delusional, like this one.
Our country is winning again. In fact, we're winning so much that we really don't know what to do about it. People are asking me, please, 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 Mr. President, we're winning too much. We can't take it anymore. We're not used to winning in our country.
It was also filled with a lot of comments that I found you could find to be true, but just not in the way Trump intended, like when he said this.
When it comes to the corruption that is plundering, it's plundering America.
Yeah, there's corruption plundering America, all right, but it's coming from the Oval Office. It's the president's meme coin dinners. It's his kids' crypto schemes. It's all the grift and the graft. It's the tearing down of the East Wing. It's the building of ballrooms paid for by secret donors. It's all of that corruption enriching the first family. But somehow, I suspect that's not what the president was talking about. And then there was this comment.
I can say with dignity and pride that we have achieved a transformation like no one has ever seen before, and a turnaround for the ages. It is indeed a turnaround for the ages.
Oh yes, we've seen a transformation in this country, all right, like we've never seen before, where we have armed, masked, ill-trained agents demanding to see people's papers, shooting them through windshields, shooting them while they're lying face down in the street. Yes, that's a transformation we haven't seen before. We're seeing a transformation around the world with our allies now questioning our devotion to democracy, questioning whether they can rely upon us, and our enemies fearing us a lot less. That's a transformation too, again, probably not the one Trump was talking about. Now, I chose not to go to this address. I've gone to every State of the Union for the last 25 years. But given the president's daily lawlessness, given his rampant violation of his oath of office and the Constitution, given the fact they're using the Justice Department to go after the president's enemies, including two of my Senate colleagues for making a video the president didn't like, given the fact the administration is ignoring court orders, I did not want to treat last night like business as usual. But nevertheless, we have watched the speech, so you don't have to, and I'm now going to go through just some of the lies he told last night. So here's Trump saying we're back and bigger and better than ever before.
Our nation is back, bigger, better, richer, and stronger than ever before.
That probably doesn't need much explanation, patently false, but let's be a little more specific. Here's another more drilled down claim by Donald Trump.
When I last spoke in this chamber 12 months ago, I had just inherited a nation in crisis with a stagnant economy, inflation at record levels.
So he didn't inherit an economy with inflation at record levels. In fact, inflation was much higher earlier in Biden's term. It was much higher in the 1970s and other parts of our history than it was when Donald Trump inherited the economy, which had inflation about 3%. And what has Trump done? He's made inflation worse. Rent costs are up. Utility costs are up. Manufacturing jobs have fled. Trade deficits are greater than ever. That is hardly the superlative economy that Donald Trump is claiming. If the economy is roaring like never before, it's roaring like a sick engine because Donald Trump's tariff regime and on and off tariffs have wreaked unprecedented destruction on our economy. Well, this economy that Trump claims is roaring like never before added just 181,000 jobs in all of last year. That's the worst job creation record since 2003 if you exclude the recessions. So not exactly roaring the way Donald Trump would have you believe.
And in 1 year, we have lifted 2.4 million Americans, a record, off of food stamps.
When Donald Trump says he has lifted 2.4 million Americans off of food stamps, let's understand what he's really saying. He's saying that 2.4 million kids now are going to go hungry because of his big, beautiful bill, as he calls it, because that big, ugly bill dramatically cut the Supplemental Nutrition and Food Assistance Program, or SNAP. And as a result, lots of American kids are going to go hungry because of Donald Trump. And on the subject of tariffs, once again, the president repeated the lie that he often tells, that somehow these are paid by other countries when they're paid by you.
And as time goes by, I believe the tariffs paid for by foreign countries will, like in the past, substantially replace the modern-day system of income tax.
In fact, Trump's tariffs cost your family last year about $1,700. Trump also went to claim that his tariff regime was something of long existing precedent and he had the power to do without congressional action.
Congressional action will not be necessary. It's already time-tested and approved.
As we saw from the Supreme Court, that isn't true. It wasn't true before the court decision, and it certainly isn't true after the court decision. In fact, as a result of his lawless invocation of these tariffs, we now have to go through the complex process of figuring out how to refund the tariffs that American consumers and small businesses had to pay in the first place. Refunds that the president is opposing. He doesn't want you to get the money back that you spent on his ill-considered tariffs. He also made the claim that his tariffs have helped him solve different wars. Here he is.
Many of the wars I settled was because of the threat of tariffs. I wouldn't have been able to settle them without.
Okay, that's another bogus claim. Most of the wars that Donald Trump is claiming to have resolved, he didn't resolve. They were either not existing at the time, or they were existing but haven't been resolved. And certainly the tariffs haven't played much of a role in the 8 supposed claims that Trump is making about wars that he has stopped or prevented or who knows what. This is all part of Donald Trump's weird campaign to get a Nobel Peace Prize. Only stranger, perhaps, was his claim during the State of the Union last night that he should get the Medal of Honor. And if it wasn't precluded by statute, then he would give himself one. Now, why he would deserve a medal that is awarded to our service members for the most incredible bravery in combat, who knows? But Donald Trump, I guess, thinks that he deserves every award in the world.
I've always wanted the Congressional Medal of Honor, but I was informed I'm not allowed to give it to myself, and I wouldn't know why I'd be taking it. But if they ever open up that law, I will be there with you someday.
Now, you might remember this scene from last year's State of the Union, when it was over, Trump thanked Chief Justice Roberts for giving him immunity. Look
again. Thank you again. Won't forget. So good. Yeah.
But here's Roberts this year after Trump dumped all over their decision on tariffs.
Therefore, they will continue to work along the same successful path that we had negotiated before the Supreme Court's unfortunate involvement. So despite the disappointing ruling, these powerful country-saving, it's saving our country, the kind of money we're taking in.
I guess we can take some consolation in the fact that the State of the Union addresses have given the Chief Justice as much discomfort as so many of the rest of us, albeit for very different reasons. On the subject of taxes, Trump repeated his oft-repeated lie that the tax cuts he provided last year were the largest in history. That's false.
Last year, I urged this Congress to begin the mission by passing the largest tax cuts in American history.
They were probably among the largest tax cuts, however, for really rich people and large corporations. That's who got the benefit of this. And those tax cuts for rich people and large corporations were paid for by massive cuts to your health care. That's right, they took $1 trillion out of Medicaid, they took more out of the Affordable Care Act, and they gave all that money to Trump's rich friends and large corporations. Of course, Trump, no one got richer over the last year than Donald Trump, who brought in billions for himself and his family. Trump also claimed that the housing crisis America has been facing was purely Biden's fault.
And low interest rates will solve the Biden-created housing problem well.
Well, much as the president likes to blame his predecessor for everything, in fact, this has been a long-standing, long-growing problem that precedes Biden. Admittedly, didn't get any better during the Biden administration, but nevertheless, we have not been building enough homes in the country for years. And that really needs to change, but nothing we heard from the president indicates he's willing to change it. In fact, his policies have made the housing problem even worse. Because of his crazy tariffs, building materials have increased in cost exponentially. Because of his immigration policies of deporting construction workers, construction costs have gone up enormously. So housing is more expensive now because of Donald Trump and his policies, not less. On prescription drugs, the president claims to have stopped the inflated price of prescription drugs. Here he is.
I'm also ending the wildly inflated cost of prescription drugs like has never happened before.
So I don't know if you've checked your prescription drug costs lately. They have not gone down. So another patent falsehood by the president. He claims to have done what no president has ever done before in bringing those costs down. Well, that's just plain wrong. He also says he's addressed the high cost of health care.
I'm also confronting one of the biggest ripoffs of our times, the crushing cost of health care.
Well, he's addressed it all right by making it higher. He's addressed it by taking $1 trillion out of Medicaid, by attacking the ACA, by essentially taking health care away from millions of Americans. That's his way, I suppose, of addressing health care. That is, to get rid of it for so many millions of people. And of course, no Trump speech would be complete without the usual derogatory and bigoted and racist attacks on immigrants and people of color.
The Somali pirates who ransacked Minnesota remind us that there are large parts of the world where corruption and lawlessness are the norm, not the exception. Importing these cultures through unrestricted immigration and open borders.
Of course, this is just patently false and disgusting, but it is what he does. It is also what has made his immigration policies so deeply unpopular, sending these masked agents into our streets, not to create safety, but to create chaos, to create mayhem, to result in the loss of American lives. This has been the result of Donald Trump's immigration policies and the kind of xenophobic bile that he spews in addresses like this one. Trump also repeated his claim that we are the hottest country. Here that is.
Now we are the hottest country anywhere in the world, the hottest.
But unless he's talking about climate change, I'm not really sure what he means by that. Sadly, so many Americans are leaving the country, people with advanced degrees. Our scientists are leaving the country because of the hostility to science and fact in this administration. Others, the best and the brightest from around the world, are choosing not to come to this country. They're going elsewhere to start businesses, to engage in path-breaking discoveries. We're seeing a brain drain again, but it is not the brain drain that has always benefited the United States with the best and the brightest coming here. Instead, we're seeing the reverse, with some of our best and brightest leaving the country and some of the best and brightest around the world no longer willing to come here. One thing that barely got addressed in his 2-hour speech was the villainous attack by Russia on Ukraine. He said that Ukraine was going to be the 9th conflict he would solve. Here he is.
And we're working very hard to end the 9th war, the killing and slaughter between Russia and Ukraine, where 25,000 soldiers are dying each and every month. Think of that, 25,000 soldiers are dying a month. A war which would have never happened if I were president, would have never happened.
But if Trump's idea of solving the Ukraine war is to serve up Ukraine on a platter to Putin, thanks but no thanks. Instead of solving 8 conflicts or stopping 8 conflicts, as our troops amass with a potential attack on Iran on the horizon, he seems intent on starting yet another conflict, and doing so without any authorization from the U.S. Congress. Perhaps most significantly, he continued his effort to cast doubt on elections. He said that the only way Democrats could win in elections is if Democrats cheated. This is a constant refrain from Donald Trump trying to lay the foundation for his electoral losses. He knows his party is likely to take a beating in the midterms. In every special election since Donald Trump's election, Republicans have gotten clobbered by voters who do not support his draconian policies, whose lives have not been made by his presidency. So he is once again trying to disenfranchise people. He is promoting the SAVE Act, which would require people to produce a passport or a birth certificate before they can register to vote, an effort to suppress the vote of potentially millions and millions of Americans who don't have those documents but are legal citizens.
And perhaps most importantly, I'm asking you to approve the Save America Act.
And of course, Trump once again teased a potential 3rd term for him.
So in my first year of the 2nd term, should be my 3rd term, but strange things happen.
This was in part a reference to his continued false claims that he had an election stolen for him. But it's also a part of his way of saying, hey, I just might be a dictator. I just might be your president for life. He loves to float these things, and if he's criticized for it, claim it was a joke, but it's his way of socializing an insane idea that he may want to pursue. He hopes to so discourage people from voting that they just give up and walk away. But of course, that is the last thing the American people can afford to do. We need to look at every challenge to voting that Donald Trump puts in front of voters as an obstacle that must be overcome to save our democracy. Trump, of course, repeated the false claims of people who are undocumented voting and massive voter fraud. It's the same kind of nonsense we've heard from him before. The incidence of voter fraud is exceedingly rare. The real fraud are people like Donald Trump, who in 2020 badgered the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, into finding 11,780 votes that did not exist, but were just one more than he needed to overcome President Biden's lead. That is the kind of fraud we need to be concerned about, and that is the kind of fraud that Donald Trump represents. So Donald Trump spent most of the 2 hours rambling and ranting, praising himself, bragging about his non-existent accomplishments, interrupted periodically by introducing guests in the gallery, some of whom were veterans and deserving of great acclaim for their courage and their bravery. But it was the usual fusillade of lies from the president, the usual trumpeting of America as the hottest country and Americans as being too tired of winning because they're winning so much. But for the American people, the reality is, of course, far different. They're not tired of winning. They're tired of struggling to pay their rent. They're tired of struggling to put food on the table. They're tired of high housing costs. They're tired of all the disappointments coming from the administration and from Washington, all the promises betrayed. They want something better, and they want something different. At the end of 2 hours, even some of the Republican members of Congress, I'm sure, were just hoping and praying it would end soon, finding it difficult to even keep their eyes open during this long, meandering address. In fact, they looked a little bit like this.
My best morning and afternoon to play it their way and sit like a horror show cooperative malchick in the chair of torture while they flashed nasty bits of ultra-violence on the screen.
So thanks for watching tonight's video.